Okay, good morning and Shavua Tov, everyone. And again, if you missed the beginning part, this will be recorded and people will be able to view it afterwards as well. So I want to welcome back to our shul, our guest speaker for this morning, Mrs. Karen Hochhauser. We first crossed paths even before I knew her because she knew my wife back in the day, involved in the New Jersey NCSY scene. And she went on to make a very successful career in Israel as an educator. And she visited us actually 2 years ago, I think it was now, along with her husband, Dr. Karen Hochhauser. They were part of the Mizrahi Israel weekend, in which scholars and residents visited shuls all across the United States and beyond. And they made a big splash here. I remember in particular my daughter, who I'm going to send her the link in just a moment, remarked how much she really enjoyed the shir that we had at our home. I think it was a Shal Shudas time for mothers and daughters. Mrs. Karen Hochhauser is an administrator, teacher, and director of alumni affairs at Tiferet, post-high school midrasha in Ramat Beit Shemesh. Before making Aliyah in 2007, she was a teacher and the director of Israel guidance at Hillel Yeshiva High School in Deal, New Jersey. And she also previously served as an education coordinator and researcher for the Agency for Jewish Education and the Jewish Federation of Detroit. Ms. Hochhauser is originally from New Jersey, has her degree, bachelor's in English literature and master's in Jewish education from Yeshiva University. It is my pleasure to introduce and welcome back, this time virtually, but hopefully next time in person, Mrs. Karen Hochhauser.
Amen. Next time in person sounds great. It's funny, I was speaking to one of our students from Chicago about how much we enjoyed coming to your shul. And I said it was last year. And then I realized actually it wasn't last year. It was almost 2 years ago. And it was such a beautiful Shabbos. And I personally come even recruiting for Tiferet to Chicago. And so I very much miss my yearly trip this year. It's a really warm and special community, but at least we can do this virtually. One of the things that I feel like I hope that we've all been feeling is that if we have to have Corona in this world, at least we are blessed with technology. And it's an amazing thing that I can be sitting in Israel, learning with you in Chicago, but I also see that my parents in New Jersey have joined this year. And so what a beautiful thing to be able to do. Before we get started, I would just like to say that one of our Tiferet alumni, who I know is a member of your community now as well, Rebecca Barry Zucker, she and her husband were just blessed to have a baby boy who is in great need of a refuah shalema. So I'd like this year to be in the merit of a refuah shalema for their son, Tinoch ben Rivka Tamar, and just that she should continue to feel good and that the baby should gain strength and health, in the coming days. So the topic of the shir that we're going to learn today is objective happiness versus subjective happiness, the Torah's view on what's better, what's worse, and what's realistic. Now, in general, these types of topics, honestly, are of great interest to me. Maybe it's a little bit my personality, which is a little counterculture in certain ways. But if the Torah is telling me to do something, or the Torah is telling me to be some way, my first almost knee-jerk reaction to that would be, hold on, how come? Why is that important? How am I exactly supposed to go about doing that? And that's a little bit what I'd like to discuss and learn with all of you today. So we're going to jump right in. Hold on, let me just share the screen. Here's where I have to hold my breath and daven that this goes well. There we go. Okay, everyone can see that. Okay, we're going to start right off with the Mishnah and Pirkei Avot. Ben Zoma Omer, I'm actually, because of timing, I'm going to just skip around a little bit to the parts that are relevant, that there are 4 different archetypes. A person who is wise, Ezehu Chacham, Halomed Mikol Adam, he who learns from every person. And then the Mishnah brings verses from the Torah and verses from Tanakh, that back that up. And then we have the idea of Ezehu Gibor, who is someone that is mighty, is strong, someone who is able to conquer his inner inclination, his Yetzer Hara. Then we have number 3, Ezehu Ashir Hasameach Bechelko, right? Who is wealthy, who is rich, a person who is happy with what he has. And then finally, the last one, Ezehu Mechubad HaMechabed Habriot, who is a person who has kavod, who's respected, who has honor, someone who gives honor to others. Now, this is a very interesting Mishnah. Because here we essentially have 4 different states of being. And in order to achieve those states of being, we essentially have to conquer the opposite way that might be our nature. If I want to be considered someone who's wise, it's not, and if I want to innately be wise, it's not just about how many journal articles I've read, how many degrees I have. It's whether or not I can look around at the other people in the world and learn from each and every one of them. If I want to be a person who's mighty, it doesn't matter if I'm, lifting 150 pounds at the gym. It means that I take my vices, the things inside me, not just my physical issues, but also my mental and emotional issues, and I work on them day in and day out to conquer them. If I want to be a person who's respected, so I need to respect others. And then the one that we're going to focus on today is if I want to be a person who is wealthy, well, then I need to be a person who is happy with what I have, not a person who's constantly going out to get more and to acquire more, but to look at what I have around me and say, I'm satisfied with it. So it seems that we already now have a little bit of what we'll call almost a paradox. On the one hand, it seems that I can have objective happiness in my life. If I can only manage to be happy with what I have, I will be a person who is objectively happy. But on the other hand, it seems that the Torah, the Mishnah here, tells me, well, there is some subjectivity to this because by definition, it means that maybe when I look around, I won't always be happy with what I have. And of course, the magic question is going to be, how do I do that? How do I conquer that? And if we go down the page and we see in Sefer Shemot, one of the big 10, the Aseret HaDibrot, is lo tachmod beit re'echa, lo tachmod eshe re'echa, ve'avdo ve'amato v'sharo v'chamaro v'chol asher re'echa. Right? I should not covet. I should not be jealous. If someone has something that I want, be it an animal, be it a relationship, I should not covet that. And we are going to come back to that in a few minutes specifically. But what's interesting here is that if the Torah tells us that there's something that we shouldn't do, so again, it's a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, it's my job not to do it now. But on the other hand, the very fact that the Torah tells me to do it or to not do something means that Hashem understands that my basic nature, or humanity's basic nature, would be to do the opposite. So the fact, to be more specific, that there's a directive that I shouldn't want what other people have, and that's something I really have to keep in check, by definition, it means that as a human being, I'm going to want what other people have. And now I have a responsibility to work on that and rein it in. And in fact, psychology, there is an amazing podcast. Rabbi Gelman and I were just schmoozing about this the other day as we were getting the technicals for the shiur in place. There's an amazing podcast called The Happiness Lab. I'll just say, I think this is a life-changing podcast. Now that we all have a little more time in our homes, you could get it on iTunes, you could get it on Spotify. It's not a Jewish podcast, but it is definitely a life-changing thing to listen to. So it's given by a psychologist named Laurie Santos. And in it, she quotes a really interesting piece of research. She said that psychologists have studied this topic of objective versus subjective happiness for many years. And so they asked people, what would you rather your salary be? Would you rather make $50,000 a year, or would you rather make $100,000 a year? And when asked that question, 100% of respondents, of course, answer, I'd rather make $100,000 a year. Who wouldn't? But then they changed the question and they said, would you rather make $50,000 a year and everyone around you makes 25? Or would you rather make $100,000 a year and everyone around you makes $250,000 a year? And all of a sudden, the answers started to change. And what the research shows is that people would, even though $100,000 is objectively more money, I can do more things. I can go on more vacations. I can buy a nicer car or a nicer house or a nicer whatever. Even though $100,000 is objectively more money, if everyone around me is making $250,000, I'd rather not take it. And people would rather make $50,000 and be higher up, so to speak, on the totem pole than those around them. And what the research has shown is that very much this idea of subjective happiness and sort of comparing really infiltrates how happy we are on a daily basis on our lives. And so the Torah here understands that very well, of course, because psychology follows the Torah, not the other way around. But here we see how that we have a job, and our job needs to be, how do I uproot that? So I thought it might be interesting to take an actual case study of this in Tanakh. A person who really, really was so jealous and acted and their jealousy drove their actions. And that's with Korach. Korach in Sefer Bamidbar leads a very planned, premeditated rebellion against the leadership of Moshe Rabbeinu. This is very different. Rav Soloveitchik writes at length about how the rebellion of Korach is very different than all the other times where Bnei Israel complains. We don't have food. We don't have water. Why did you take us out of Egypt just to give us this very difficult lifestyle? All of that, which has its own, stuff to learn about it, that was more coming out of needs of the Jewish people in the desert that they felt were not being met. But when it comes to Korach, it's really a planned and staged rebellion. And the Ibn Ezra, one of the medieval commentaries, explains, where does this come from? So, Vaikach Korach, Zeh hadavar haya b'midbar Sinai, ka'asher nitchalfu habechorim v'nivdalu halevim, ki chashvu Yisrael shemoshe Adonenu asa midato, latek dula le'achav. That where does this come from, this anger and this rage that Korach has, that he starts a rebellion against Moshe, that he decided, and the people that were along with him, they said, look at what Moshe Rabbeinu did. He made his brother the Kohen Gadol, he made his brother the high priest, and we should have had that job. And who is it for Moshe to take something that belongs to us, or that we feel belongs to us, and to give it to someone else? And when they felt that something that was theirs, that belonged to them, that deserved to be theirs, is being taken away from Moshe, they felt like that drove them to rebel in such a terrible way. Now, that's a very extreme example, but the truth is we feel this all the time. I'll tell you a funny story to illustrate this point. When my husband and I were first married, we were youth directors in a very, very wealthy community. And the community was so wealthy. I remember that we once ran an event for the kids, and we bought the least expensive white frilly paper plates that you could buy in the supermarket. Okay, we all know what those are with the frills. Okay, so I think we bought like a package of 1,000, and we left them on top of our fridge. Now, this is not so eco-friendly, what I'm about to say, but essentially we use those paper plates like water. And the pile never diminished. And at some point I remember being in our kitchen, and I turned to my husband and I said, the way that we look at these paper plates, like there's so many of them, and we will never run out of them, is I think the way that the people in this very wealthy community look at money. And it's interesting that we can live here, and we were like very young and newly married and very poor, and we were not jealous of the wealth at all in the community. And it's not because we're such righteous people. It's because the wealth was so beyond our reach that we couldn't even feel jealous of it. If someone that I knew got like, I don't know, a nice bracelet, maybe I'd feel jealousy from that. But it's so beyond our reach that we felt like there was nothing even to be jealous. So I know there are a lot of examples of this where this happens, in particular in the sports world. And I was researching a particular example, but then I found a great clip from none other but Jerry Seinfeld. So I feel like I'm going to let him explain this phenomenon. He's going to do a much better job than I do. Can everyone hear it? No. Okay, one sec. I had my 10-year-old daughter make sure that this worked before. So 1 minute, I'm sorry. Hold on. I'm just going to stop.
Volume on the YouTube video has to be up.
It is, but also she showed me, this is what's great about kids, I have to share the computer sound, which I had not done. So I'm going to do it right now, and I think it's going to work. So, okay, I think this is going to work better. Can Rabbi Gelman, if you hear it, will you just give me a thumbs up? Thanks so much. All right, let's take two.
I was in London about a month ago. The World Cup was going on. I enjoy any sporting event where nations get involved. I find that the most exciting. The Olympics is really my favorite sporting event, although I think I have a problem with that silver medal. I think if I was an Olympic athlete, I would rather come in last than win the silver. If you think about it. You know, you win the gold, you feel good. You win the bronze, you think, well, at least I got something. But you win that silver, that's like, congratulations, you almost won. Of all the losers, you came in first of that group. You're the #1 loser. No one lost ahead of you. And they don't lose by much. You know, these short races, 300ths of a second, 200ths of a second. I don't know how they live with that the rest of their lives, because you got to tell the story. Everyone wants to hear the story. Wow, congratulations, silver medal. Did you trip? Did you not hear the gun go off? Tell us what happened. It's 100th of a second. People say, what was the difference in the margin there? What was it? Well, it was like from now to now, now to now, now to now, now. That was it. That was it. Oh. I trained, I worked out, I exercised my entire life. I never had a date, I never had a drink, I never had a beer. I was doing push-ups since I was a fetus. I flew halfway around the world. Everybody I knew in my whole life was there. The guy shot out the gun. Oh. And they always have that photo finish. You know, the photo finish was always silver, gold. This is the whole race. Gold, silver, bronze, dead last. Greatest guy in the world, never heard of him. And, you know, guys got to be thinking, if I had a pimple, I would have won.
Okay, so in that funny clip, he actually is quoting very deep psychological research that what we see and what we understand is that if we feel like something should be in our grasp, when we don't get it, it makes it much harder to live with. In the example I gave with the paper plates, that's like the bronze medal. I'm just happy I have something, you know, I really never thought I could have anything. The silver medalist says, well, the gold medal really should have been mine, and I just didn't get it. And that is actually a source of disappointment. So to go back to what we said at the beginning, when we read in Pirkei Avot about the idea of Ezehu Ashir Hasameach B'Cholko, one of the messages that the Torah is trying to teach us there is that we have to start to understand that the things that are ours and the things that aren't ours are given to us by Hashem. There is a wonderful book called Sicho B'Avodat Hashem, which is like a really interesting collection of a different Torah with a little bit of a Hasidic bent. So I wanted to share with you one of my favorite pieces from this book. It's in an article about happiness, actually. So now we're by the top of the screen. It says, he's talking about one of the holy tzaddikim from Lublin. Every day before he went to daven shacharis, they bring in a small child. And he would give him a coin as a present. And after that, he would go to daven. So they bring in a kid, the Rebbe would give him a coin, and then he'd go to daven shacharis. They asked him, all of his constituents, all of his talmidim, they asked him, why are you giving this special gift to a child, to a little child? That child doesn't understand the value of a coin given to him by the Rebbe. Again, it's a Hasidic story. It would be better to give it to an adult. Because the adult will understand, wow, the Rebbe gave me this coin. I understand its value. Why waste it on a child? So listen to what he says. This is the first set of underlines. Ana hachozeh, ki ikar kavanato b'nitinat zo l'sameach nefesh Yehudi kodem atfilah b'shleimut simcha. He said, my goal in giving this coin is to bring joy to someone before, as I start my day, as I go into daven shacharis. V'ilu yutein zo leish mubugar. Had I given it to an adult, no matter what I give him, I am not going to achieve this goal of him having happiness. Either because if you give someone something, he'll think about all of the things. Like I give you a coin, maybe I want 50 coins or 100 coins or 200 coins, or maybe because when he gets that coin, he's going to be thinking about, wow, the Rebbe gave me a coin. If only this happens, if only this happens, if only this happens. Lekach, therefore, I'm in the second set of underlines, bocher dafka betinok. He specifically chose a small child. He knew that the small child would have a huge amount of joy. Why? Because what happens if you give a little kid a quarter? They're so excited that they got a quarter. When you give a little kid, I know for my own young children, sometimes it's the classic thing they say with a very young kid, like a 1-year-old. You could give them this whole amazing present with all the bells and whistles and lights and whatever. They're so excited about the wrapping paper that they can rip up into a million little pieces and dump all over the floor. And they're laughing with joy because a child has the ability to just see what's in front of them and rejoice in it and not compare. Although now I'm going to pause and say, I'm not sure that's 100% true about every child. Let's talk about the difference between an oldest child or an only child. And let's say child number 5. I'll use my own children as an example. When my oldest daughter was, let's say, 2, if someone gave her a lollipop, which probably, by the way, would have given me some type of, heart attack that someone was giving my 2-year-old firstborn child a lollipop. So she just had the lollipop and it was the greatest thing in the world. And now what's funny is I see that when my 5-year-old, my youngest, gets a lollipop, one of the first things she does is she'll often look around to see what her oldest siblings have. Now, again, a little bit, that's a learn. If she's on her own without her siblings around, she's super happy with what she gets. But the minute there's people around her, she's comparing. So what we have from this story is the reason why the Rebbe would bring in a child and give that child a coin is because he says there's something to learn from a child about how they look at happiness, how they formulate happiness. And it's a child's ability to sort of live in that moment when they're almost in isolation that an adult lacks. Because in adulthood, we're always looking at everything we have in comparison to either what we've lost or what we've gained. And so again, to go back to this idea in the Torah of objective happiness versus subjective happiness, I'd like to say though, when I wrote the title for this year, a little bit, the title, if I was giving myself a grade, it would not get an A+, because what we're starting to see is it's not so much about objective happiness versus subjective happiness, what's better, what's worse. They're both the reality. And the question becomes, what am I going to do about it? How am I going to live a life that has maximal happiness? And what does the Torah have to say about that? And so I want to share with you one more source. Also happens to be from the Ibn Ezra. Back on that pasuk of Lo Tachmod, that I shouldn't covet something that isn't mine. He starts off with the exact question that we've been asking. Anashim rabim yitmahu al zod hamitzvah. There are many people that really sort of wonder about this mitzvah. How could it be? How could it be possible that I'm not going to be jealous of what my friend has around me or what my neighbor has? It seems impossible. And by the way, the Ibn Ezra lived long before Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, all of these things that we have that make this very, very hard in our generation. Before I get into the Ibn Ezra, I'll tell you, I saw a great meme the other day where it was a picture of an apple and the apple looked perfect. But when the camera, you saw both sides, you saw a mirror reflecting the other side of the apple and there was a giant bite taken out of it. And the point of the meme was to say, like, when we go out and we look on our social media, we look around at all the things that are being posted, everyone else's life looks so perfect. We're not seeing the bite that's being taken out of the apple. So now that I feel like maybe I'm constantly plagued by a certain amount of jealousy and that jealousy is infringing on my happiness, what do I do about it? So the Ibn Ezra gives a mashal. He gives a parable in the underlines. Da ki ish kafri sheyesh lo da'at nechona v'hu ra'a bat melech, shehi yafa lo yachmod ota b'libo sheishkav ima. He says, let's say you have the princess and the pauper. And in order to make this Ibn Ezra work, we basically have to take every Disney movie ever created and every fairy tale that we've ever seen, and we have to put it in a box. Because the way a fairy tale works is that you have the pauper, he loves the princess, and he gets her. But the Ibn Ezra says that's not real life. If there is a pauper and he sees the princess, he is not going to be jealous of her. And he goes on to say, don't think that there's something wrong with this pauper. He knows she's beautiful. He knows she's wonderful. But she's so far out of his reach that he should be able to control those feelings of jealousy. And he says, I'm in the second set of underlines, Kacha kol maskil tzarich sheida isha yafa o mamon lo yimseinu adam ba'avor chachmato b'dato rak kasher chalak lo Hashem. That every person should understand that if there is something, let's use the example of money. If I wish I was wealthier, if I can look at that and say, well, for whatever reason, what I earn, this is what Hashem wants me to have, that will really do two things at once. It will stop my feelings of jealousy, because if I have belief that God is the one who's choosing and custom making for every person in this world, exactly giving them what they need. So then I say, okay, Hashem is giving me what I need. I'm not going to be jealous. And then number two, that of course is going to really open up the doors of simcha, of happiness in my life, because when I'm not jealous, there's a lot more room for me to be happy. And I don't know, if we were able to dialogue more, I'd ask everyone there now to tell me who really believes this is possible. And maybe half of you would say yes, and maybe half of you would say no. But I'll tell you the truth. we all do this all the time. There's so much to learn. I have a chavrusa with some students in the halachot of kibbud av v'em, of honoring your parents. And one of the things we see time and time again is that the way that God expects us to act is the way that mirrors the relationship between parents to children. And one of the things that we do all the time, for anyone there, whether you're a parent or a child, and you've experienced this from one side of the desk or the other, we all know that we demand from our children that they trust us, that we are meeting their needs, and they should be satisfied with what they have. If I give one of my kids a cookie, and she comes back to me saying, but no fair, one of the other ones got 3 cookies, what will I say to her? I will not say every time, oh, you're right, I will also give you 2 more cookies. I will say to her, we don't all get the same. Or I will say to her, listen, Ima understands how to take care of everyone's needs. And right now, you need 1 cookie and she needs 3 cookies. Now, will that make that child happy? Of course not. But if I have a healthy relationship with my child, she will understand that even if she's unhappy and throwing a tantrum and stamping her feet, she'll still feel secure in the relationship because she'll understand that at the end of the day, I have her best interests at heart. So if we can do this, whether it's with our children, whether it's with our siblings, whether it's with our employees, whether it's within all of our human relationships, so it becomes a lot easier to understand that when Hashem, who's running the whole world, is meting out for each person, come Rosh Hashanah, come Yom Kippur, what each one of us is going to get, that Hashem is looking at the world and saying, this is for what you need, and this is what you need, and this is what you need. Now, does that mean that I can never try to increase my station in life? Of course not, right? And through a relationship of both hard work, hishtadlus, putting in my effort, and also, let's say, tefillah, asking Hashem to provide me if I feel like I have a need. So I can always try to do more. But let's say for whatever reason, it's not happening. So what the Torah is trying to tell us is that that's the time to stop and take a deep breath and say, okay, for right now, this is what Hashem has given me. And right now, my job is to learn how to be happy with it. I have a wonderful colleague who I work with who told me a story. He said there was a person who came around in Israel on Friday afternoons. There's a lot of people who come door to door asking for tzedakah. And there was a particular person that came to him a lot, so much so that they developed like a relationship. And this person tried so hard, everything. It wasn't that it was a bum and he was sitting around doing nothing and drinking his money away. It was a person who tried to get job after job. His wife tried to get job after job. And he once said to my colleague, everyone feels bad for me. They look at me and they think that I'm a nebuch and like, oh, my life is so terrible. And the hardest thing for me about my position in life is that they feel that way, because I don't feel that way, because I understand that I have put in blood, sweat, and tears to try to change my reality. And for whatever reason that I do not understand, right now, this is how Hashem is telling me it needs to be. And if right now, this is what I have to do, this is what I have to do. And my job, while I keep pounding the pavement to try to become financially independent, my job is not to look at the world and see everything that I'm lacking. It's to see everything that I have people who care about me, that I have people who are making sure that my basic needs are provided for, that I have options that might come to me in the future, that I have a relationship with my wife, that we're blessed with children. And he said, my whole avoda, my whole work in this world now is to see what I have and not to get caught up with what I don't have. And sometimes that's very hard for us to do. I'll tell you one more story and then we'll close. I'll tell you that one of the interesting things about my job is that I really see this. A challenge for all of us, obviously, as we go through our lives, is that we only have the arc of our life, and this can become very difficult because we only see the moment where we are now. So sometimes I see every single year student after student who's going through the arc of growth that is the year in Israel. And there are certain challenges that repeat themselves. There are certain hardships that the students have. And it's amazing to be able to look at a student and say, the hardship is part of your journey and the hardship is part of your growth. And the reason why I can say that with confidence is because I've seen hundreds of students go down the same path. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu has seen millions of people go through the path of life. And still, he says to us as a Torah law that we need to be happy with what we have. And certainly the idea of Ivdu at Hashem b'simcha, that we have to do our avodat Hashem with happiness in this world. And part of our job is to figure out, each one of us in our own place, how to exactly go about it. And I think that one of the last sort of secret tips and tricks that we can learn from psychology is the idea of finding what's called flow. And flow means when I'm involved in something, I'm deeply immersed in something, not something easy. Flow only comes when I'm doing something that's just a little harder than my comfort zone, not so hard that I give up, but just a little harder. And I'm entirely immersed in that experience. I can feel happiness even though around me there are things that are difficult. And the truth is, we've seen this time and time again. When in America there was no flour because everyone had taken on in Corona these crazy baking projects, that's a way of finding flow. I would never try to normally make bagels from scratch, but I made bagels several times in Corona because it was a project, it was a challenge, it was something right in front of me to bring me joy. And so my bracha to all of us is that we can find the things in our life, great and small, immediate right in front of us, as mechanisms for coping, and again, giving us these little nuggets of joy day to day, and also in our long-term outlook to say that we understand that we have value, and we understand that we're all blessed and gifted with the tools and capabilities to take our reality, no matter what it is, each one of us with our own challenges and our own difficulties, and to look at it and say, there is a way to find happiness within this. Whether it's a time in my life where I really am blessed with happiness, I'm making a simcha, things are going well, I won the lottery, whatever it is, that I can say, wow, I appreciate and value so much the simcha. And whether, lo aleinu, it's in a time of difficulty and hardship, where part of my job is to not ignore the difficulty and hardship. We're allowed to feel our emotions, but to stop and say, if Hashem is giving this to me, there has to be something within it there has to be that within it I have the strength and the fortitude to conquer and accomplish. And to go all the way back to where we started, when a person can conquer and accomplish the things that are difficult for them, when you have a person who can gain wisdom by appreciating all of the wisdom of those around him, when you have a person who can gain strength by defeating the Yetzer Hara, when you have a person who can feel wealthy because he or she is happy with what he has, and when you have a person who can who can be respected because he respects or she respects others. So that's a key and a gateway to happiness. And we should all be able to do that with ease. And Bezrat Hashem, next time we get to learn, it should be in person. Thank you all so much for taking the time on a busy Sunday morning.
Thank you so much, Karen. This was a great share. I want you to know, while you were speaking, so I'm always trying to manage people signing in, not signing the Facebook thing, another text message. I said for a moment, I'm just going to focus in, zero in on what you're trying to say, not be distracted by anything else. And an incredible peace and joy overcame me. And it was exactly at that point you said that very point, that if you could just sort of zoom in on, no pun intended, but on what it is you're in the moment, you can experience a great deal of joy. I think it's a profound and important lesson for our generation and always. So I want to thank Karen once again and all those who have participated today, and remind you that next week we continue our series, our Zoom Scholar Residence Guest Lecture Series. Next week we welcome Rabbi Shlomo Katz, who will do like a shir and concert. That's Sunday, November 29th. So I invite everyone to come participate in that, followed by Charlie Harari, Bibi Deutsch, famous marathon runner, and now bicyclist, and then our own Dr. David Shivitz and Rabbi Dr. Zev Elif from Skokie. We're looking forward to continue this series. And if you have ideas, it looks like we're gonna have to continue this in the second semester from January 15th and on. So if you have ideas of those you think would be nice to have virtually at our shul, please send me the name, and we will definitely look into it. Thank you so much. Shavua Tov. Thank you, Karen. And everybody
My
should have a
pleasure.
wonderful
Thank
day.
you for the opportunity.
It was an honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Shavua Tov.
Thank you.